So the first impediment is that of age. According to Catholic canon law, if the man is under 16 years of age and the woman is under 14 years of age, the marriage is invalid. However, regional conferences of bishops, like the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, can modify the canonical age, and in many countries this has been raised to the age of 18. So wherever you are in the world, I know that there are members of NSTI all over the world. You'd have to check with your local conference of bishop to find what is the minimum age. But if someone marries under that age, it is a null marriage. It's not a union. Number 2, perpetual physical capacity for consummation is lacking. What this means is that the man cannot exchange or communicate his genetic material. Pardon the crass language, but in Code of Canon Law, it describes that the man cannot ejaculate true semen. If this is the case, then the marriage is considered null going into it because it's lacking in the procreative intention of holy matrimony. Number 3, an impediment is previous marriage. If you've been married before, you cannot enter into holy matrimony. And canon law includes here, even though they're not considered valid marriages, civil marriages or any attempt to enter into marriage in the past. So these have to be declared null by the church, investigated before someone can enter into holy matrimony. Otherwise, the current attempt to enter into matrimony is considered null and void. The 4th is disparity of cult. This means marriage of a Catholic person with a non-baptized person. Now, you can ask for a dispensation. So this happens frequently. If a Catholic person wants to marry someone who is, say, Jewish or Hindu, they can, but they have to seek a dispensation from their local bishop. If they do not, it's an impediment and the marriage is considered null. Number 5, sacred orders. If one of the parties, well, the male one, is in holy orders, he's a priest, he cannot enter into holy matrimony. The union would be null and void. However, he could seek a special dispensation and receive it, though that's very rare. Number 6, if one of the two people seeking matrimony is in perpetual vows, this would include someone who's made a public vow to be celibate their entire life. This would include, say, a Carmelite nun or a Benedictine monk. If they've made vows of chastity, they cannot enter into holy matrimony. Number 7 is abduction. This would be where one of the parties has been kidnapped and forced or coerced into it. So think of, 7 brides for 7 brothers. You can't just capture a girl and marry her. That is considered a impediment. Number 8 is crimen, sometimes just called crime. This is where one of the parties has killed their previous spouse in order to enter into the new marital union. So if a man didn't like his wife and he killed his wife to marry another woman, that itself would be an impediment. Number 9, consanguinity. This is that you're related by blood. You can't marry your sister, you can't marry your aunt, so on and so forth. Number 10 is affinity. So this is kind of like incest, but it's marrying someone who's too close to you by a prohibited degree. So an in-law, a sister-in-law, so on and so forth. Number 11 is public propriety. So this would be where King Henry VIII had this problem because he was having relations with a woman and then wanted to marry her sister. So it's like having a common law marriage and then trying to marry a relative with the person you had a common law marriage with. Number 12 is adoption. You can't marry someone you've adopted. If a man adopts a woman, he can't enter into holy matrimony with her. 13 is spiritual relationship. This is a really interesting one, and Thomas Aquinas talks about this. Traditionally, a godparent cannot marry a godchild or anyone with spiritual affinity. This has been mitigated in the Roman Rite. It still is in effect in the Eastern Catholic churches. But yeah, if a man served as a sponsor for a friend who became Catholic as the godfather, he could not marry her, even if they fell in love later on, unless they sought a dispensation. Number 14, lack of form. So if you have two Catholics or a Catholic person and they get married outside the Catholic Church with a different form of matrimony, a Protestant form, a Jewish form, that for a Catholic would be a null marriage. 15, coercion. That is that you psychologically or you blackmail someone, coerce them into to taking the vows of matrimony. Again, null and void. 16, psychological immaturity or mental incapacity. This would be someone who has a psychological handicap or someone who has special needs mentally. They also cannot exchange vows for a valid marriage. 17, this is an important one, refusal to have children. If both people are coming to the altar to get married and one of them in their mind says, I'm never going to have children, I don't want to have children, that right there would invalidate the vows. It would be a null marriage. And then last of all is the exclusion of fidelity. This is if one of the members at the altar is thinking, yeah, I'm going to marry this girl, I'm going to marry this guy, but I'm not going to be faithful to them. I'm going to have a mistress, I'm going to cheat on this person, I'm going to continue to have relations outside of marriage. If that's within their intent, even if they say the words out loud, that vow is invalid. They are not actually married. So those are the impediments. Those are the things that would undermine or exclude a valid contract of holy matrimony. The covenant of matrimony would not actually exist. And this is where the Catholic Church gets the idea of an annulment. An annulment is not like a divorce. It's not something that you do or get. An annulment is really, the best term is a declaration of nullity. A declaration of nullity. So the church, in the office of the bishop, examines a union and says, did this union, through the vows, was there any impediment that would make this union not an actual marriage? And if the answer is yes, they will issue a declaration of nullity. That means that, Bob and Sue were never actually married. It never happened. It was null. They're free to marry other people. Now, no doubt, if you're Catholic, you know people who have gone through this process. I know people who have gone through this process. It can be very difficult. It can be embarrassing, and it requires, of course, mercy and patience and pastoral sensibility. But if you're listening to this and, maybe you find yourself in this situation, what you need to do, or if you have friends in the situation, you need to get them in touch with a holy and solid Catholic priest, and they need to be in touch with the local diocese to go through it. And it might be helpful. You can use your notes here or use this video to know exactly what are the points, what are the impediments that the Catholic Church has that would make a marriage null and void. If Bob and Sue say the vows and there are no impediments and there's no lack of intention, they are married and they can never, they can't be divorced and they cannot seek an annulment. They are actually married. And so that raises the question, well, there are people in that situation who are validly married. They want to be Catholic or they are Catholic. And the question, comes up, where is their place in the church? What do they do? Well, the church has, a variety of responses. The first would be, well, if you are sacramentally married to another person, the ideal, the best situation is that you would be reconciled to that person. That union, that holy matrimony would somehow be able to be rekindled even through the pain, and that the life that God intended for that union could be brought forth through sacramental grace. Now, for a lot of people, that's just not possible. There's been a lot of pain, there's estrangement, maybe distance or moving or however, or maybe another civil union has been contracted since then, or maybe children have been conceived in another relationship and it just gets really messy. So the church proposes to these people, you basically have, three options. One is disregard the teaching of Christ in the church. All right, that's not a good option. The second is, and this can be painful for many, is to live as brother and sister, especially if there are children in the home, but there's not a valid marriage. They can live together and raise those children as a loving couple, but sexual relations would not be allowed because technically one or more of those parties is married to another spouse. And so any sexual relationship there would be adultery, which constitutes a grave sin, and we Christians are not allowed to engage in adultery. So that's a very hard teaching, and a lot of people just can't accept that. And so they leave the Catholic Church and they become Episcopalian or Eastern Orthodox or something else. But that's the Catholic teaching, and it's very consistent with the words of Christ. Another option, which is also not desirable, is that a man and woman continue, who are not validly married, who have a previous marriage, live together and continue to have sexual relations, but they cannot, according to the church, receive Holy Communion or go to confession, unless, of course, they intend to end the sexual relations. And people find this unfair, but you have to think about it objectively and theologically. If the man and woman are not validly married and they have sexual relations, they are committing adultery. And followers of Jesus Christ are not allowed to engage in adultery. So they're not allowed to have full sacramental participation in the church. So again, that's a very difficult thing, a difficult cross. But I think those couples in those situations should seek spiritual direction and pray about it and work through it together. So there it is. That's the teaching on divorce and remarriage and that confusing topic of annulments. The most important thing is to realize that sacramental marriage is a great blessing. It's a beautiful thing. Christ raised it from a natural order to a mysterious sacrament, one of the 7 sacraments in the New Testament. So let's make sure that we pray for young people that they enter into holy marriages, and that those of us who are in holy matrimony, that we can continue to live a sacrificial life with our spouse, and we continue to be a blessing to those around us and to our children. Well, thanks for watching. God bless, and we'll see you in the next video lesson.